So I have to get this out of the way. Uh,
I always
have,
worry when a sentence starts that way.
yeah. Have you tweeted anything about Elon Musk yet today, or was that just one of your 5 items to do over the weekend?
I have not. I will tell you, I wrote that tweet like on Saturday night. I was sitting in front of the fire with my husband and I was like, damn it, this makes me so mad. And I wrote the tweet. And then the next morning, like the whole world is blowing up. And my husband, Archie, who was sitting next to me on Saturday, he was like, when did you do that? So Saturday.
It was very authentic. On the subject of what Elon is doing, just to get this out of the way, about cutting down the size of the government, what concerns you the most? And do you hear worries now from your Republican colleagues behind closed doors?
So, yes, I do hear worries about this behind closed doors. I think many of my Republican colleagues understand that the federal government is this incredibly large and complicated thing. And I think that all of us agree that we should be looking for ways to make the government work better for people. And we should be rooting out places where we need to improve the way the federal government works. But what Musk is doing, in my view, is not that. And you can see what he's doing is sort of taking this sort of sledgehammer to initiatives that he really knows nothing about. And I think a great example of that is how, we went into the Department of Energy and they, I don't know, accidentally or not, like let go the people that were responsible for securing the national nuclear stockpile. And then they're like, oh, shoot, we've got to find who those people were, but they didn't know how to find them because they didn't have the documentation to be able to find out what their home email addresses were. And so to me, that is not about improving efficiency. That is just, actually dangerous. And there's so many examples of the things that they've done that Minnesotans say, wow, that's not helping me. And in fact, I think that's really hurting me.
Mm-hmm. And are you hearing concerns from Republican colleagues now?
Yes, I am. But there's a little bit of let's wait and see what this means, how this all pans out. And I think there is incredible pressure on them to sort of support the administration regardless of what it does. And the question is what happens as that pressure builds. And they are hearing, we could see this past week, and they're already hearing a lot from their constituents about this. And that will, I believe, ultimately, I'm a believer in this democracy. I believe that people who are elected ultimately need to be responsive to their constituents. And so that does give me some hope in this moment though, and it's deeply concerning.
Yep. You recently announced your decision not to run for re-election. What brought you to that point? And during your time remaining, which is a whole term in the House for perspective here, right, what are you hoping to get done on climate and energy?
So, I've served in the Senate for 7 years. I will have been in the Senate for 9 years by the time I leave. And I would I always remind people, a governor will often serve 2 terms. And by the time they're in the last 2 months of their 2 years of their gubernatorial term, they're like, everybody knows that it's time for them to move on, honestly. I actually think that it is a great thing to come into the Senate, do the best work that you can, and then make room for new leaders to come in and do the same again. And honestly, my decision was just purely personal. I love my family. It's a little bit of a cliche for politicians to say that they're leaving elected life to spend more time with their family, but I actually like my family and I want to spend time with them. People keep coming up to me and they'll say okay, are you ill? Is there something wrong? Mm-hmm. No, everything is fine. As I think about climate and energy and what we want to accomplish the next 2 years, let's just be honest. We're dealing with an administration that is pretty clearly overtly hostile to clean energy. And I think that, my strong belief is that the clean energy transition is a transformation that is going to happen. We're in the midst of it. And the only question is whether the United States is leading that transition or whether it's following. And I think that we should lead. And so what I'm going to be doing the next 2 years, I'm realistic about this, is trying to do everything I can to keep on building the coalition that understands that and wants to keep us in the lead when it comes to innovation and technology and competitiveness, and also, by the way, lower energy prices and more reliability to the electric grid which means that without really understanding why, the lights go on when you flip the switch.
Yeah. And we were talking about the grid in the green room back there. And I'm curious, from your time in office, what have you learned about the grid that everyday people do not understand that gives you sort of a different perspective on the policy issues that should be prioritized here?
Well, in a well-functioning system, everyday people don't need to understand exactly why the lights go on when you flip the switch. But what I have learned is the incredible complexity that goes into making that happen, and the linkages that go from that solar farm or that wind farm or that power plant into your house, and how that all comes together was really brought home to me when Secretary Granholm and I early one morning went to the MISO facility in St. Paul and looked at how that operation protects the reliability and the and makes the whole system work. And both of us looked at this massive, a massive screen as bigger than this, with all of the lights points showing where the grid was connecting and how it was all coming together. And we just looked at this and went, oh my God, neither one of us had really understood it before. And getting that, figuring that out, and then saying, okay, what does that mean for what we need to do around permitting reform and what we need to do around making sure that those good collaborations that happen work? What do we need to do around cybersecurity? What happens if there's a breakdown, and then how long it takes to bring the whole thing back up again, I believe is something that all policymakers should understand better.
Yeah. How are you and your fellow Senate Dems trying to protect the provisions of the IRA as the Senate works through the reconciliation process?
Yeah. Well, so, just sort of for level setting, yesterday, just get my numbers out here. Yesterday, the House passed their budget resolution for the big tax bill that includes $1.5 trillion in spending cuts and $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. To give you an idea, the entire over 10 years IRA clean energy provisions are roughly $1 trillion. So as they go hunting for cuts in order to pay for their tax breaks, they're going to come looking. We know that. And so what we have to do, I think, is, we have to do everything we can to defend this. We have to help folks understand how these investments are good for jobs and good for economic opportunity in red districts as well as other districts. And I think many of our Republican colleagues appreciate that. We just have to figure out how to bring that home. At the end of the day, in a functioning democracy, you accomplish things and then you protect your advances by building coalitions of support. Mm-hmm. And that's what we have to, continue to do. But we also could lose it all. We should understand that. And what that means for the capital investment that is in process right now around clean energy, whether it's manufacturing or building solar or wind. We're already seeing some of that capital likes stability and predictability, and that's been thrown out the window, and I think it's creating massive problems.
Have you been surprised by the zeal with which the administration has gone about going after climate policy in its first months or so in office?
Honestly, it's not surprising. I think, sometimes with President Trump, there's this little kind of thing that people do, like, should we take him seriously or should we take him, what is it? We take him literally or take him seriously? And, I took him literally as he was, when he brought that group of large, fossil fuel executives down to Mar-a-Lago and he said, contribute to my campaign, $1 billion, and this is what I'll do for you. I believed it. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And it's clearly bad for the U.S. economy. It's clearly bad for the local economies and districts all over the country. And I think it's clearly misguided, because I do think we should be leading this technology transformation and not dismantling our early advances. And this, a lot of discussion is happening right now around competitiveness with China, and how there's this who's going to win that fight? Well, we're not going to win that fight if we pull away from the clean energy opportunity.
Now, back during the Build Back Better days, you were the champion of the Clean Electricity Payment Program. Essentially, it's a clean electricity standard that could withstand reconciliation process. It didn't make it into the IRA in the end, but what's next for that issue? Do you see any long-term prospects for it?
Well, the strategy there was to provide sort of combination of incentives and also penalties to help utilities move to clean energy without that cost having to be borne by the ratepayers of the utility. So we did a lot of consultation with investor-owned utilities, munis, and also co-ops to figure out how to put together a plan that would work for them. And we made great headway. We were unable to get it done at the end of the day. A lot has changed since we were working on that. And of course, the IRA incentives have been very, very powerful. So we were doing a lot of thinking about what would be sort of, 2.0 after passing the production and investment incentives. And then, of course, we lost the elections. And so where we go from here, I'm honestly not really sure on that issue. I still think that we should be looking at how we can partner with utilities to promote the move to clean energy without while still protecting the affordability of electricity. And I think in some ways, as we see the kind of surge in demand for electricity happening because of data centers and AI, we need to even think more about not only what we need to do on the grid, but how we need to make sure that we're meeting that demand, that we can supply that need in a way that is going to help protect affordability and reliability.
And on that subject, like that is one of the biggest subjects in any energy context, any energy conversation right now. You get to data centers and AI.
Right.
What do you think needs to be done to ensure that, let's say, the data center demand increase is quite real, which is debated,
right?
And that we need to get a whole lot more electrons onto the grid quickly.
Yeah.
Are you worried? And what might we be able to do to ensure that is done in a way that does not blow our climate goal?
Yeah. Well, it's such a good point, and I think I know there is some conversation out there about whether we could be seeing some sort of a bubble that is developing around data centers, and there's examples that I've been reading about as like big the big tech investments that are moving into that, and then are they going to pull back, and what implication is that going to have? That's, I think, a big challenge. The other challenge that we're seeing in my home state is data center developers who are wanting to create their own sort of backup generation capacity that might be very unfriendly to meeting our climate goals, and also might have real kind of local implications. For example, if you want your backup grid, if you want your backup energy source to be, a gigabyte of diesel, then you're obviously going to have a problem. And I think that our regulatory frameworks are not really catching up with this as quickly as they should, and it's a big burden on the PUCs to figure this out. And I know that this is, they're working really hard to do that in Minnesota, and I'm sure around the country as well. So I also just think it reminds me again of how important it is that we do some regulatory reform, so the needs of building out the grid are able to be actually met. We knew, we've known for quite a years now that if we can't speed up the way that we are updating and modernizing the grid, we will never be able to meet our energy demand, goals.
Yeah. How concerned? This is a separate issue, one that's near and dear to your heart in Minnesota, which is the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. The Biden administration moved to put a 20-year moratorium against mining in that area. President Trump had said during the campaign that he would reverse that step. Are you thinking about and how might you go about blocking that move, which must concern you?
Well, it's a very interesting question as we talk about the need to be able to have access to the critical minerals that are essential to the clean energy transition, and how mining in this country happens. And my strong view is that it's irresponsible to be anti-mining at the same time that you are pro-clean energy. However, that does not mean that you're in favor of all mines in all places, and that's where the Boundary Waters comes in for me. I don't know who in this audience have ever been to the Boundary Waters wilderness area in Minnesota. For those of you who haven't been there, it's the most just remarkable place. Millions of acres of basically water and land right on the Minnesota and Canadian border. It has been a national wilderness area since 1978, and it is just the water is pristine. It is an economic driver in the region and that part of Minnesota for tourism. It is used year-round. Well over 100,000 people visit it every year. It's so beautiful. And so what do we do about this proposal to build a copper-nickel sulfide mine right on the border in the watershed of the Boundary Waters, kind of mining that like 100% of the time ends up polluting the water nearby. And so I think that ultimately this will have to be worked out in the courts. Obviously, we don't have the legislative power to pass a law protecting it, though I think it's important to do everything that we can. And I would also point out that there are other mines in Minnesota that are that I don't oppose, that I think could begin to start to meet this demand. So, yeah, I think it's misguided, very, very misguided.
Gotcha. Now we're out of time, but your staff tipped me off for one fun thing, that you're an avid birder. So I'm going to give you a little quiz. And I'm sorry, but I went down a rabbit.
I've been given the answers that
I went down a rabbit hole yesterday of bird names. So I'm going to name 5 birds, one of which is not an actual bird. Let's see if you can tell which is made up because of this rabbit hole that I went down. The rufous-crowned sparrow, Wilson's warbler, belted kingfisher, greater tern, magnificent hummingbird.
Magnificent hummingbird.
Sounds fake, is actually real. The wrong one is greater tern, but as a consolation prize, I'm curious what your favorite bird is.
Well, so right now, my favorite bird actually is the cardinal. At this time of year, cardinals are just like brilliant, bright red. And in Minnesota, it's kind of gray and white and brown. And when those cardinals come to our bird feeders, they are just like a flash of beauty. Now, my brother, who is an amazing birder and travels all over the world, he kind of dismissively calls these yard birds, but I love them.
Awesome. Well, for Jen.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you all. Thanks.
Thank you very much.